narrated by Tim McNiff, the news anchor for KARE 11's Sunrise, Minnesota. We're going to have Nick Ryson, the Director of Business Development, Positive Coaching Alliance, 8-year NFL veteran. Otis Grigsby, 6-year NFL veteran, General Counsel for Players Health. And Corey Koski, 19-year Major League Baseball veteran. Please welcome them.
Welcome, gentlemen. Good morning. For this panel, I just want to try to save a couple minutes at the end. So if somebody with the facility wants to give me the high sign, we're about 10 minutes out, because these guys are, I think, if you're parents, maybe you want to know how does Johnny get where these guys got, and if you have any of those questions or what they're doing with their kids, I want to give you that opportunity to ask those questions. So just know that'll happen. Of our panel up here, we have 3 former professional athletes, 2 from football and 1 from baseball. So we don't have maybe the breadth of some of these other sports that we could draw on, but we're all going to do the best we can. What we want to do today is we want to take a deeper look at the impact of being a multi-sport youth athlete. We're going to talk about the ongoing debate regarding youth athletes specializing in sports too early. We'll hear from professional athletes who were multi-sport athletes as youth growing up and whether they thought this impacted their path to the pros. Is that, and I'll just throw this out there and I'll start with Nick, is that common? Because this sport specialization seems to be sort of a more recent trend. Did you grow up playing multiple sports?
Absolutely. I grew up in a small town of 9,000 people in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, and really they didn't have enough athletes actually to play all the sports. So my senior year, I actually lettered in 5 sports. I did football, basketball, wrestling, track, and baseball, and lost about 20 pounds in a month playing basketball and wrestling at the same time. My mom thought, what's wrong with you? Because I was eating everything out of the house. But it's something that my favorite sport, even though I played professional football, my favorite sport was whatever season I was in. And whether that be basketball and whether that be wrestling, it's just something that we're able to challenge ourselves and do something different. And each sport has something to offer for potentially the professional sport that you're going to play, whether that be, wrestling in terms of your balance and anticipation of, movement in terms of jumping and foot skills versus, playing basketball, and then track for speed and baseball for hand-eye coordination. I think that there's so much attributes that you can take from other sports that, can help you further your career down the road. And then obviously we're talking about safety and overuse of, actually my current job now, we're ensuring, professional baseball players and pitchers. And one of the biggest things we look at is, well, how many years have they pitched? And is that all they do? Because we're looking at Tommy John surgery and UCLs and pitchers' elbows, and whether or not I actually want to insure them, if they would be considered a good risk. So yes, it's a big part even, as a youth athlete, but even as they're further down the road as a professional.
I want you guys to know too, if I ask one question of one of you and you want to add in on something like that, just put finger up and let me know that you want to add something to that. So Otis, could you talk about your experience?
Yeah, so with my experience, I played multiple sports. My first sport was soccer. They made me play goalie, so I didn't get much action at 5. But I played baseball. Baseball was my first love, really. Played football, basketball, and I was good at some sports, not so good at others. But I think just to add to Nick's point, playing multiple sports helped me connect with people in different sports. And there's different types of personalities, there's different team dynamics. And I think that made me a more whole person. And I never had to deal with the sport specialization. It's a kind of, I don't want to call it crazy, but it's an interesting thing that's happening, and I definitely don't really like it, so yeah.
So Corey, I just have to set this up by saying when Corey was playing for the Minnesota Twins, I was working as a sports caster at that time. And I don't know how many times you were probably asked about the crossover growing up in Canada between hockey and ultimately what you ended up doing playing baseball. Could you speak on that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, has anybody here watched Sesame Street? Remember back in the day, Sesame Street? It's like, which one of these guys is doing their own thing? It's like it's a football thing, I'm in a baseball thing, and I'm like, which guy is out of place here?
Wait, I thought that was me.
Yeah. So there was, the one thing as I was, because when I first started playing baseball, I didn't really start playing baseball until I was 19 years old, and learning the game later in life has helped me out significantly now, because when I was going through all the stuff, trying to learn how to play the game of baseball, learn how to catch a ball, how to hit a ball, you know, it's a lot of the stuff what a lot of 8, 9, 10-year-old, 12-year-olds are going through right now. And I had a lot of difficulty fielding a ground ball. I made it to big leagues because I can hit a little bit and I can catch a ground ball every once in a while. And TK hated. TK was a big defensive guy. And I remember the story where, you know, where I would go out and I'd get guardy before every practice. And we, you know, playing baseball, we play every day. Unlike the football guys, they can only handle it once a week. We played every day. So
We'll have comments later.
yeah. So, but anyways, so I went out and grabbed Gardy every day, and we would take ground balls, and I really struggled taking ground balls. And he would get, at one point, he just got really, really frustrated with me, and he goes, dude, didn't you play hockey? And I'm like, well, yeah. He goes, weren't you a hockey goalie? And I was like, yeah. He goes, well, didn't you play volleyball and could jump like the highest in Canada? And I was like, yeah. He goes, well, you're an athlete. Be an athlete. Stop trying to be like every other baseball player out there and just be athletic. And I'm like, oh, I can just do that? He goes, look, we don't care what you look like as long as you catch the ball and throw it over there before that guy running gets there, we're all happy. And I'm like, well, that's all I have to do? Because I thought I was doing right, left, split, do it this way. He's like, no, just get the ball over there before that guy gets there, we'll be happy. I'm like, oh, okay, well, can I borrow your hat? And he's like, yeah. So I took his hat, threw it over there, grabbed my hat, threw it over there, said, okay, now try to score on me. And from there, he just would hit the ball as hard as he can, and I would pick it and try to do stuff, and that just was freeing for me. And so that was kind of a scenario in which playing the other sports actually helped me. And you know, if any of you watch me play, you know, that's why I kind of fell into my own little niche, is playing hockey like a goalie, like trying to make that glove save. And that was probably the most exciting time for me playing defense on the Metrodome, is when somebody hit it to my left and I was able to do one of these big glove saves. Remind me back of the day of Grant Fuhr and that stuff. So you know, that was my hockey, because I grew up, my dream was to play NHL hockey, and I just wasn't good enough. So I ended up playing baseball.
Not a bad consolation. Otis, you mentioned that you said baseball was my first love, so you ended up playing football.
Yeah. So I grew up a huge Braves fan, and you know, my dad wanted me to be a pitcher, and you know, it was something that he didn't really know how to teach me about, but he really wanted me to do. So I watched all these like Greg Maddux pitching videos and you know, whatever else he could come up with, and we'd practice like every day. So I'd go to practice with my teammates, and then after practice I'd come home and we'd go to the yard and just pitch until the sun went down. And I got frustrated over and over and over again. So eventually I would start doing things like throwing wild pitches on purpose. I'd throw it in the dirt and see if I could skip into his crotch. You know, and when he got frustrated with that, I'd throw balls into the fence and break boards. And you know, it was something that I really loved, but I felt like it just wasn't necessarily the best fit. And I also got pushed towards football by my coaches in high school. Once things became apparent that I was better at football, my high school baseball coach told me just not to try out for the team the next year. And it was really weird. And at the time, I thought, man, maybe this guy just doesn't like me or something. But looking back on it now, I know that you know, they saw me as an asset in football and they wanted to develop me. So maybe in a certain kind of way, I started, you know, that whole sports specialization path, you know, as a junior in high school.
So in the last panel, we had both a school administrator and an orthopedic surgeon who both could speak on this subject, you know, in different ways. And obviously, I'm not going to ask any of you guys to go down that road, so you're welcome. But talking about this whole phenomenon of sports specialization, I never heard of anybody playing basketball and wrestling at the same time. I thought for sure you'd tell me it was baseball and track. That I could see, but I couldn't. I just can't even see what you did and how you did what you did. So how did you end up in football?
Well, I think Otis made a good point when he was first talking that, you know, when you're younger, the reason you don't want to specialize too early is because you don't know the sport that you actually love. You don't know the actual sport that you're actually going to be good at, because eventually all of our bodies, from youth athletes, they change and they morph and they grow, and you're somebody different than you were when you were younger. And that's the first part. But then in terms of how did I end up in football, I thought I wanted to be a 6'2" white basketball player, but that wasn't in the cards for me. Even though I was able to perform at a high level and during both those sports, but you know, truly I love the contact. I love that team camaraderie that truly nothing teaches you about needing and trusting the person next to you than playing football. I think, as we talk about safety and we talk about football as a whole, I think the intangibles that I gained from playing this sport is something that I would never give up, for the life of me. I think, being able to have to trust the guy next to me, because if we're not all on the same page, and if my D lineman and I take the same gap because I was a linebacker, there's an A gap, and that running back's going to find it. They're good enough at the pro level that they're hitting their head on the goalpost and strike up the band, and we just lost the game. But you have to be able to trust and count on the person next to you. Plus, it's also a sport that is very violent, not like baseball. And the reason we can only play it once a week is because our bodies do need to have recovery. And that's why they get to take days off. You get 15 DL, 15-day DL, right? you hurt your finger, right? bit the hangnail. Okay, you can come back later.
Well, there is a funny story about it. There actually, a guy did go on DL for his hangnail.
There you go.
And he slid into second base. I can't remember who it was. He played for the Angels, and he came up. Oh, I wish I could remember who it was. He slid into second base, and I thought he broke his finger. He's like, ah! And he was screaming, and I was at third base. I'm like, man, I hope he's okay. And then a trainer ran out there, and he comes out, and he pulls out a Band-Aid, and he wraps it on his finger. I'm like, dude, seriously right now? if you go out to the point where the trainer runs out, you got to be off the field. And he pulled it out and put a Band-Aid on it. Gosh. During the course I will remember who this guy is at some point during the course of this day.
Well, so eventually, there was one point we had two different people insured. One was a baseball player, and he had stabbed himself with a pen somehow. I think he was a pitcher. And then there was another one that was a quarterback, and he had like 3 herniated discs in his back or his neck. And which one came back sooner? The football player with 3 herniated discs in his back versus the guy who stabbed himself with a pen. So there's a difference that, I talk about the team game. I talk about being able to deal with adversity and what football teaches you and taught me. Plus, my grandfather played for the Packers in 1946, and my brother played for the Arizona Cardinals. So it was kind of in my blood and in the pipeline that this is what I was going to do.
I had this big experience as a high school football coach. The team I was coaching for was preparing for the Prep Bowl, with state championship in the large school classification. And the high school hockey tryouts were going on at the same time. And I had a player who was a JV running back come up to me and say, can I leave early to go to tryouts? I go, when do you want to leave? And I told him, I go, okay, you can do it, but don't say anything. So he leaves, and we think we pulled this off. And so the next day, we're at practice again. It's about that same time, and all of a sudden, head coach starts yelling for that kid. So I'm like, they're looking around, and he's my kid. And so I start looking at my plays, and head coach comes over and says to me, where's Hallie? And I said, Hallie? Where's Hallie? Like, I don't know. And he said, did you let him go to hockey? And I said, yes, I did. And he goes, you know what we're practicing for. You know what this means. And I said, if you don't let him go to hockey tryouts, you'll never get another hockey kid again. You never will. And he said, you're right. So I'm wondering, you guys, what sacrifices did you have to make?
Wow.
Or any regrets to the decision or the path you chose to take?
So I had to sacrifice band. So my first year playing football was the 7th grade. I only signed up for football because all my friends were doing it. In Texas, everyone starts at 5. So I was super late. I had no idea what was going on, but it's like everyone's doing it, so I'll do it too. And I was also signed up for band. So, I came to practice the first day, and I said to my coach, hey, coach, band practice is at the same time as football practice. So when will I be able to go to band? And he said, you won't. And that was it. And I look at musicians now and I think, man, that could have been like the next Jimi Hendrix or something, But here I am, pro football player, which is not a bad place to land. But so I sacrificed that. I think as you go higher up in the ranks, you sacrifice a little bit of time for education. I graduated in the top 6% of my class in high school, and grades was always something that was important to me. But you get to college, and now you're essentially like a professional athlete, light, right? You have a full-time job where they block off 6 hours of your day. You're in practice, you're in meetings, film, weight room, and then you've got your study time. But there's a block where you just can't even go to a certain class. So when I went to Kentucky, I started out as an engineering major, And, I met the dean of the College of Engineering. It was great. And that first week of practice, I showed up 5 minutes late because of a class. They knew I'd be there late. And I got demoted from second string middle linebacker to like fifth string. So now I'm on practice squad, practice squad essentially, which is fine if that's where I deserve to be. But if I'm being punished because I'm, pursuing my education, that's, a little disappointing. And, I ended up going the interior design route after I suggested that, hey, maybe I could do architecture. And they said, well, yeah, that doesn't fit with our schedule. You've got classes after midnight with architecture, so you can't do that. They suggested interior design. I laughed and eventually thought, well, I can just come back and do architecture later. I mean, now I'm a lawyer, and it's all worked out, but that's a thing that you sacrifice, and a lot of people do care about, the student athlete. They want you to be a great athlete, but it's hard to be amazing at both. And I'm just really impressed by people like, Myron Rolle, for instance, who's a doctor now and played pro football. It's amazing.
Corey?
There's a concept that I try to talk to my kids about that I coach. It's here's what you want. Are you willing to do what it takes to get what you want? And so, we're in a culture, we're in a society right now that everything's given to them. And so are they really willing to do what it takes to get what they want? Well, if it's too hard, they don't really want that. And anybody who does anything, who has had any success in this world, I've been lucky enough that because I was able to play a professional sport. I don't have the educational background. I got a high school degree from Canada, if that means anything here.
It does on South Park.
Yeah. And so, from an academic, I don't have a strong academic background. But the sacrifices that you have to be willing to take, because, like I said, lucky enough that I'm around a lot of successful people now who've had success in business, who started their company and doing this stuff, and everybody says they want to be a millionaire. Everybody wants to be this. Everybody wants to be that. But are you willing to do what it takes to get to where you want? And so, we talk about the sacrifices that sports that we do, that the kids do in sport. I know I kind of went on a little tangent here, but we talk about, there's this fight right now. You hear everybody talk about everything I read about. They talk about the millennials and the participation awards. Oh, everybody, we're in this world right now because everybody's got a medal for just participating. Well, if we really break that down and we really evaluate it and really think about what it means to participate in a youth sport, why don't we give people medals? And why don't we celebrate their participation in it? Because for somebody to participate in a youth sport requires sacrifice. They're going to have to show up to the event consistently, because once you manage employees, showing up is actually a pretty cool trait to have with your employees, because not everybody shows up. So to actually show up, and then the second point of that is you think about this for another point, is it's really easy for the really good guys to show up. What about the 95% of the people who are okay? And what about the bottom 10% of people where they're showing up and they're getting their teeth kicked in every day, but they show up? So, that's a sacrifice for them. They're not sick, they're feeling good, they're made fun of, because every time they step on the ice, some kid walks them. And in the dynamic of a locker room, they're gonna feel that and they're gonna hear it. But they show up every day. So as we got these two groups of people, one mocking the people for giving the participation award, and I would wish we would do a better explanation of what participation means. But for these kids to show up every day for a youth sport event, for practices, they deserve recognition for that. That is a participation award, because it's deeper than that. And so it's a sacrifice that these kids are making on a daily basis to try to participate in the sport. And my sacrifices, obviously, I had to make a lot of sacrifices to get to. Anybody who's had any success has had to make sacrifices. So I don't know if my sacrifices are any different than your guys' sacrifices in the room. You have to make choices along the way that you're not going to be able to do certain things. and we all make sacrifices to kind of get what we want. And I was lucky enough that I had a supporting cast around me that supported me in the sacrifices that I chose to make.
I don't think I'd ever considered that I made sacrifices, because the reason you give up something is because you want to attain something greater than what you think is attainable. And I was very fortunate to have a mother that we'd sit down every single day, or every single before the year started, and set goals and say, all right, well, my end goal was I want to make it to the NFL. Okay, well, that's a big goal. It's going to take you about 10 years to get. So let's start with a smaller goal. That's something that's much more tangible and attainable within a 6-month, 3-month time period. So we go down B honor roll, C honor roll, A honor roll, whatever it may be. And then I wanted to be a starter on this team. I wanted to make this. I want to make all conference. I wanted to make this. So there's things that are attainable that says, you know what, I want to get to the NFL, but let's go backwards. Let's take steps backwards every single time, because I always talk about to kids, and one of the greatest things I ever learned was I went to the NFL Rookie Symposium in 2002 when I was drafted by the New York Giants. And there's 3 words: choices, decisions, consequences. This is something I talk to my 9-year-old daughter all the time is, when you have a goal, well, we all have choices in life. To show up to work, we don't show up to work. Show up to practice, don't show up to practice. Put in the extra time working on our stick skills or our ball skills or whatever we're going to do. And that decision that you make will inevitably be the consequences that you will have to live with the rest of your life. If we decide not to show up to work, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to get fired. You may lose your house. You may lose your family members, whatever it may be. That's a consequence based off the decision that you made. So I look at it and say that I made these decisions because I wanted to attain this goal. And it's something going past my end of my career. I went and got my MBA at Northwestern University, and I learned something about what energy is. And there's two different things with water, right? There's a river that has banks and it's moving all in one direction, creating a great flow and great focus, versus someone who's unfocused, which would be considered a flood. And a flood has great, tremendous ability to cause and wreak havoc because they don't have those borders and they don't have those goals. They aren't going to one direction to work together. So I would say that I never gave up anything and I never sacrificed anything, because at the same time, I was going after what I wanted to. And had I not reached it, some people say the best things you can do is fail. Fail early, fail often, because that's when you're going to learn, that's when you're going to grow. When you're uncomfortable, you're going to grow as an individual and you're only going to get better. The longer we sit and be comfortable, my wife kicks me in the what all the time and says, get your stuff together, get out there and go do what you're supposed to do. I never would have gone to Northwestern had she not pushed me, but I had to get outside of my comfort zone and push myself, and now I'm in this position where I'm at now.
Before we came up here, I asked Corey, and I don't know Otis or Nick, we just met before we walked up here, so I don't know your backgrounds other than what was on that brief thumbnail bio.
Sure.
So my question for Corey was, you have boys, and is it okay if I ask, what you're doing now? Because now you're in it. You're in it as a parent and as a coach, and your kids will face that pressure, or you as a parent might face that pressure to attend the fall camp or play fall ball or whatever it is, and your child may have a different viewpoint of what it is that they want to do. So what I want to do is offer for any one of the 3 of you, if you are currently a parent, how are you handling this? Or if you are not there yet, what you think you might do? If that's fair, and if I could start with Corey.
So besides screwing up every day, any of you guys who have kids, you know what that's like. It's tough because what I'm really struggling with is I've been there, I've done it. I've been with the best in the world at what we've done. And we've all had somewhat of a similar path to get there. The multi-sport, the taking time off, it's just, there's different, there's genetics, the genetic component of it, and then there's a skill acquisition, and there's the passion, and we spend all this time on skill acquisition. We can't spend any time on genetics, so that it is, but we don't spend any time on the passion. And so I'm sitting here and watching the world go, and I feel like I'm way over there because my view of how to get somebody to where they need to get to is completely different than the rest of the world. So I'm fighting this uphill battle, and as soon as you try to say anything, you come across as kind of, potentially a know-it-all, and that's sometimes how I feel, because I just see these people going down this path that I know that leads to mediocrity. Because really, if you want to be different, you can't go down the path of everybody else, because everybody isn't going to get to the NHL. Everybody isn't going to get to the NFL. Everybody isn't going to get the major leagues. So why, if you want to get there, why do you choose to go down the path of everybody else? Why don't you look for something to be special, to be different, to do this different stuff? So the battle I face on a daily basis is I have all my kids' friends and their parents going down this road. And, so my kids want to go down this road too, and so we allow them to go down this road, but I know it's not getting them better, and I have this frustration. And it's so frustrating because I see the drills and I see the stuff that these experts are teaching my kids, and I know that this isn't really what they need, but I allow this to happen, and it's frustrating because there's nothing really out there to really separates itself, because the real path to get to real greatness, the immune response system to the youth sport concept would kick them out and spit them out, and they would get ostracized out of the dynamic. So my kids go on this path. I kind of allow this to happen, but I don't push my kids. I allow them to go, and then I just ask them questions, and then I try to allow them. I give the autonomy to make their own decision making, and then I'll try to work with them outside, like for example, baseball, for example. So I have my kids. They go do stuff. They want to go hit with this guy, and it's frustrating because I know that he can't teach hitting, and I feel bad, but I don't know how you guys do. Like anybody who's I don't want to compare my dog. Look, I'll just keep it in the realm of sport. Like I know baseball, and I sometimes knew how to hit, and sometimes I could hit, but I couldn't hit all the time. But I know, what I do know is that I don't know that much. And the more I learned about stuff, the more I realized how little I actually know about stuff. Now I go to this guy who I'm actually paying is telling me that he knows everything. And I'm like, okay, I played 15 years in professional sports. 9 of them at the highest level. I got 4,000 or 2,000, however many at bats, and I don't quite really feel like I understand that. And you're telling me you played high school baseball and you understand that? And so I really struggle with that dynamic. So a very long-winded way to answer your question is that I try to manage it, and I manage it very, frustratingly, but I allow them to kind of do the stuff. And when they start asking questions, and when they get to the age where they actually can do something, that's kind of when I step in, because really it doesn't matter what I do for a baseball swing between the ages of 15 and under, because they're just not strong enough to have a good baseball swing. So I let them do all that stuff, and when I can start hammering in when they're actually strong enough to now have some proper technique, that's kind of when I step in, but I allow them to do all this stuff. And then when they're usually 15, 16 now, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, you know what, you were right 3 years ago. Okay, I see that now. So it's tough. It's really difficult, because as we, the youth sports is a $36 billion or $40 billion or $27 billion industry, and I feel bad because these guys are putting bread on their table with what they're selling these kids, and they're selling hopes and dreams, and so it's a really tough balance to walk, because I don't want to, but it's just there's people who are really struggling to try to make these payments to you, and so it's a dynamic that I really struggle with.
Otis?
So I don't have kids, but one day I will. And whenever that happens, I'm going to tell them, you can be whoever you want to be, right? I think every parent tells their kids that. And I'm not going to push my kids in sports. I want them to play, and I want them to try many different sports. But the number one thing is the education is paramount. Like I don't care if you are the worst baseball player, basketball player. If you're the best, you have to have that education, because when it's over, it ends at some point. Some people get to play a lot longer than others, but you have to bring something to the table every single day, and you can't rest on whatever you did in the past. So it's all about adding value in your relationship. So I just want my kids to know that I'm there for them. I support what they're doing. If engage in a sport, you're not quitting until the season's over. You know, and as far as with what sport they want to play, it doesn't matter to me. So I think I'm just going to try to keep as hands-off of approach as possible. But, you know, I mean, I may have kids who just want that from me, and if that's what they want, I'll just dig in and research for them. Anytime anyone asks me a question, I'm going to spend like way too much time trying to figure out the answer. I'm going to give you so many different options. You're going to be like, okay, last time I asked you for something. So my kids might be the same way. But yeah, I imagine it must be really difficult with the, you know, the select teams, and you know, your kids want to be a part of that group, right? You know, your friends are doing this, and you know, one thing my dad taught me, he was a pastor growing up, and you know, he taught me how to really just avoid following the crowd. I didn't go to parties when I was a kid. They started going to parties in the 6th grade. I don't think I made it to my first party until maybe my junior year in high school. And that was because now I'm like this big athlete and I'm supposed to go. But I'd go home early. And I want them to know that, you know, you build your own path. Like Nick was saying, set your goals, understand that what other people want you to do, it's a lot of times just not aligned with where you want to go. So just stay focused.
And I have 2 children. I have a 9-year-old daughter and a 22-month-old boy. But after listening to the first panel, my mind is like, what the hell was I doing? But you know, I give my daughter options. She has a goal. Her goal. She's 9 years old. She's figured out she wants to play soccer at Notre Dame. All right, well, let's find how you can get there. And my number one thing to her is not that she has to work on her right foot and her left foot. You know, so she has to be ambidextrous in both. But she has to have the grades. I said, this is the biggest number one thing. It's not an athlete student. It's called a student athlete. And similar to what Otis says, it is your academics. Because guess what? If you don't have your academics, you could be the best athlete in the world, and guess where you're going to have to go? You're going to have to go to JUCO. You're going to have to start there and go and build your way up. Because, like you said, the average career in the NFL is 3 years. Imagine you get drafted at 22, and you last the average, which that's just the average. Now you're 25, and now the average age of retirement is 65. You got 40 years. What are you going to do with the rest of your life? And that's why you want to have an education behind you and something that you can rest your hat on, other than your sports. Because listen, I know going through the NFL that you're only as good as your last play. You're only as good as your last game, and they can quickly get rid of you. They can't get rid of your mind. They can't get rid of the experience that you bring from an academic standpoint. And then in terms of how do I teach them, how do I coach them, my wife put my daughter in swimming, and she got nervous. She had her first meet the other day, and her first thing she was going to do was the 100-meter IM. She had no clue what it was. We were watching the video on YouTube as we're driving to the meet. So she is scared, you know what, right? And she gets in the water, and she does her warm-ups. She gets out, and she's talking to the coach. And we can't be on the deck with them. We're up in the stands. And she comes down, and so I go down, and I ask her, what's wrong? She's like, Dad, I feel like I'm going to throw up. I feel sick. I said, well, that's your nerves. That's because you care. You want to do well. She's like, I don't want to do it. And so eventually the coach says, okay, we'll scratch that off, and we'll scratch this off. And I pull the coach over, and I said, you put her on that block, and you let her do it. And it doesn't matter how she does, as long as she puts her head in the water and swims her best and her heart out. She got out of that pool beaming, smile from ear to ear, because she was so happy that she did it and she accomplished it. And that's pushing herself. She's very similar to me. Pushing herself outside of her comfort zone, and she's only going to grow from there. Now she wants to swim more and more and more. So I've got her in 3 different sports. She loves them all. And the hard part, like you said, in terms of specialization, I was a good enough athlete that my basketball coach was trying to pressure my parents into saying, why isn't Nick showing up for summer basketball? Because I was at Wisconsin's football camp, Notre Dame's football camp, and Iowa's football camp. Because I had other things that I had to do. But I was fortunate enough and blessed enough that I was a good enough athlete that I would be able to miss that time and still be the best player on the team. Other kids aren't. They don't have that. And so you got coaches that are pressuring these kids and saying, well, you're not going to then start. And you're going to get, put down, to a lower level because you're not. And I don't know how you do that and work that out with coaches, because I now live in a school district that's got 1,000 kids in one class, and basically you can only play one sport while you're there. So I'm not looking forward to having those conversations down when my daughter gets into high school.
To piggyback off of that, So I have a 17-year-old, so I've kind of been through it. So I've kind of seen this sports specialization evolve through the course of time. And when he was about 13, 14, or probably about 9, 10, I saw a lot of kids playing only hockey all year round. And so now there became all this talk about sports specialization. And so now what I'm seeing is kids playing. So, well, the parent would be, oh, well, you know what? Sports specialization, I need to make a more rounded athlete. So what do? Well, you know what? I'm going to put them in baseball, and then I'm going to put them in lacrosse. Well, now what I'm seeing is kids playing all the sports all year. And so versus the, okay, here's hockey season, here's baseball season, here's soccer season, and there's a lot of overlap. And one thing that I've been searching, and there's a lot of smart people in this room, that I challenge you and encourage you. I hear in everything I read, I hear about everything that what's wrong with this early sports specialization, this and that. But I haven't been able to find any sort of literature on what good looks like. So if this is our hockey season, that starts here, what should a kid do in the off season, knowing that they're going to play multiple sports? So how much break should they have? How much time should they take off of that sport? 9, 10, 11, 12. What should their time off look like? Is it a complete time off, or do they do this? Because when I was going through my concussion, the doctor told me, he goes, do what you, how did he word it? He goes, do what you think you can. Okay, I'm going to do, because of my personality and where I came from, I was going till I was puking. Well, I guess I can't do that anymore. And so the parents have that same kind of mentality, and that's what basically the message we're telling them. Well, do what you think they can do. And they're like, okay, well, where can I sign them up? I'll sign them up here, because I have the money, and I have the time. I have a nanny. They can take all this stuff, so the kids keep on doing. So where is, if somebody knows where that is, please send it to me, because I've been looking for, okay, this is what the ultimate training schedule should look like. Here's a time frame, because we have it when we work out, we have it on this stuff. What's the rest? Because these kids are going, and there's nothing out there that really says, okay, this is what good looks like. And everybody's saying, well, that's bad, that bad. But what can somebody point me in direction to show me what does good look like?
I love researching. I'll find it for you.
Oh, awesome.
Well, no, I was going to say, you're never going to find it, because what does good look like to whom?
Yeah.
And I think I'm just going to say this, and I know we're up against the clock, but I think for a lot of these coaches, it's become a way to supplement their income, and so it's a cash grab. And I've been there and I've seen it when kids have been there and they said, well, you're not going to start on the basketball team because you didn't play summer league. You were conditioning with the football team, and it's used against them. And now the kid has played that sack, says they have to make a choice. Am I going to have the football experience, or am I going to start in basketball? And when you've got a school of 4,000 or 5,000 people, they have a lot of options. So there is that. I know we're up against the clock. Is there anything anybody wanted to ask these gentlemen before we cut them loose? Sir?
Yeah, I have a question. Maybe it's more along the lines of what about your experience with us playing on hockey, stick and ball, basketball?
Pickup basketball.
Yeah.
Pickup basketball. It just seems that not only people all these guys sports, they also play their world pickup.
So is your question about play, just really play?
So
Fun play.
I have 4 boys, so I think I can take a shot at this. So in defense to them, to the kids now, we have iPhones. We have, I don't know, whose kid here plays Fortnite for 26 hours a day? They just make up 2 hours. It's unbelievable, this Fortnite. So you got these kids playing. Oh, you play Fortnite, or kids play Fortnite? Oh, geez, okay, well.
I don't know what it is. What is Fortnite?
Fortnite's a video game that these
Okay.
kids play, and it's all consuming for these kids, and one adult. No, I played Fortnite too, so
Jury's still
yeah. So, but so these kids now have these options. And I guarantee if I had this option, because I grew up on a farm, we had 2 television stations, and one of them was French. And so, and we had, and I was like 9 or 17 when Atari came out, and all my buddies had ColecoVision, but Atari, you know, you can only do this so long for that track and field game, for that 1,500 meter deal. And so that was my options. So they have a lot of options that doesn't require any physical activity. I'll give you a story the other day that this, and this could be just this bad parenting on my standpoint. So I have this hockey rink in our backyard. Who do you think cleans that thing every time? Me. And I have a 17, 15, 13, and 7-year-old boys. And so the other day I just snapped. I'm like, this is ridiculous. I got my kids in there playing Fortnite, and I'm out here shoveling the rink for them. And my kids, you know, one of my kids made the 2nd highest team on Pee Wee, so he's not a AA, he's an A. But when he made that A team, he's crying, he's bawling because he got screwed, and the world's against him. And so I was like, dude, you're out here playing Fortnite, and I'm out here shoveling the rink. Why do you think, you know, this is what you want, this is what you're willing to do, what it takes? So you think maybe if you shoveled the rink and took some extra, spent all that time working on your stick handling, you might be able to make the better teams? So it's just these kids now, they have so many options that are very easy for them. And we're celebrating non-movement. Like, you know, if a kid's a really good hockey player, or really good, we have a society and people like mocking this guy because of this, this, and this, and he's not good at, you know, so we're bringing down all the elite. And so these kids are fighting against this thing. So they have all these other options out there. And I put it a lot on the parents, because as a parent, what is my option? Go down, force them to do this, and let's go out and play, and let's play catch. Well, it's easier for me. Hey, you know what? Here's your video game. Go play Fortnite.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that video games. Oh,
No.
okay.
Yep,
yeah, I
yep,
agree
yep.
those video games are a problem, but you know, a lot of cities, the problem is there just really aren't enough recreational areas. Growing up in Texas, we had a basketball court, it was asphalt top, and you know, some people in the neighborhood just didn't really like that there were kids hanging around, you know, until like the late hours of the night playing basketball. So they just like got rid of it. We had a skate park. It was really cool, and actually, I'm the reason why it got shut down. I smashed my face falling off of a ramp, but you know, they got rid of it because I got hurt, and so that was another recreational thing that kids were just doing together, and it was gone. So, you know, there's an issue with video games and your cell phones, but it's also just not enough resources. Just kind of put into these.
Or safety for, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not going to let my 9-year-old daughter walk, 3-4 blocks. You know, granted, we live in a safe neighborhood, but still, you never know. You walk 3-4 blocks and meet up with kids and go and have a pickup game. And I think that's also where some of the social interaction and kids, you almost have to, parents now, we have to set up play dates for our kids.
Yeah.
And it's just not going on in the backyard. And guess what? I used to get in a fight with my brother or his friends or something. And guess what? You have to figure it out. And kids nowadays, they aren't able to figure out because they always have to have someone there as a parent and being with them. And so it's a very different type of world that we're living versus what, listen, it used to be my mom would kick me out at 8 in the morning after having breakfast during the summer and say, all right, be home for dinner before it got dark. And that's what you did. Now, granted, we did a lot of stupid things, but we learned from those mistakes, hopefully.
Yeah, and you can't even go on the bush anymore because you got Lyme's disease and there's all this stuff. You know?
Otis Grigsby, Corey Koski, Nick Greisen, thank you, gentlemen, very much for your time. Thank you.